good. Okay, so hello and good day to everybody. This is going to be the second episode of the Tales from the Crypto podcast. I am one of the de facto hosts at the moment. It's I kind of just happen to have the channel that we broadcast on, but I think that this is a team that does the broadcasting. So I am the one that is probably newest to the crypto scene. My name is Touring News, or you can call me Brad. Either way that's going to be. What we're going to do is we're going to go around the panel. Everybody's going to introduce themselves. They're going to talk about where you can find their work, what they've been, paying attention to. Well, first, they're going to introduce themselves, tell you where you can find them. Then we're going to go back around and say what's been interesting in the past 2 weeks since we did the prior podcast. And then we're going to be going into some deeper dives on certain topics where each person kind of has like a little bit of a specialization. And we're going to see how it goes from there. So I thank everybody for turning in and tuning in. If you can share the video everywhere, you are 100% welcome to. If you want to watch the video on your broadcasts, you have 100% permission to take it off of my YouTube and do whatever you want with it. So this is supposed to be open information for everybody. That way they can share, kind of in the spirit of what I think some of us think that blockchain can provide. So we're going to begin with Luam in the top left-hand corner, and then we'll go to Brento, Carl, Ridvan, Saber, and then we'll get started.
Hello, everybody. My name is Luam. I am a crypto, I guess you could say, enthusiast, software enthusiast, really trying to focus on teaching people about cryptography in very simple terms. It's really what I like to do. You can follow me on GitHub and Twitter. It's _Luam. Check me out.
Brento, that means that you would be...
keep calling call on me, because I don't
Okay.
remember what the order was. Hey guys, I'm Brent, Brentobox on Twitch. I'm learning about the crypto space too, and just here to talk about what I know or what I've gleaned. And if you want to ever see some of my streams, should those ever happen, it's at twitch.tv/Brentobox.
Okay, Carl.
Is that me?
Yep.
All right. I'm Carl, Your Environment Seattle. You can check out my YouTube page at yestv.org or my live streams. Sometimes I walk around with my gimbal on Your Environment Seattle. I am a multi-decade veteran of the IT software industry, and I started out in security, and so I have a pretty broad perspective on what's going on. Cryptocurrency and smart contracts are incredibly exciting these days because of the improvements in security that are happening. So I'm sure I'll have a lot to comment on this week.
Wonderful. Ridvan.
Yeah, my name is Ridvan. You could say, I guess I'm a crypto, mostly Chainlink enthusiast. That's basically all the time and information when it comes to crypto that I'm sinking my fangs into. So, and obviously that also includes lately also DeFi and naturally smart contracts that follow up on it. Proof of stake, which is also going to be part of Chainlink very soon. So if you have questions about Chainlink, poke me on Twitter. Nasrat the link is just type it out too. You know what? I'll do that later. Screw it.
Yeah, thank you. And Saber, we'll do the same thing that we did the last time. So we'll do your introduction, and then that way you're not always going to last again. You can start off with like what were some of the interesting things that you kind of like read or noticed over the past 2 weeks of developments. Then we'll go back around the way that we went, and then we'll start to get into the deeper topics.
Cool. All right. Thanks as always for having me on. I make video essays currently on YouTube, mainly centered around Afrofuturism. And you can find me there. Just write in Saber Afrofuturism and it'll probably show up. You can also follow me on Twitter at SVBXR. I really got to get a handle on my branding. It's a bit confusing for people. But I kind of like the slightly elusive aspect. But yeah. I'm also very interested in blockchain technology, obviously. And yeah, my current thing is trying to merge the technology with like some theoretical concepts to bring together two different worlds that seem to be galaxies apart at the moment. So yeah, and in terms of something that I noticed in the past week or two that piqued my interest is a project called SingularityNet that I talked about briefly last time, which is the AI project or decentralized AI project. And they recently decided to get into the DeFi space to essentially try to figure out how to use AI to, in combination with um, DAO technologies, which can essentially allow people to get funding for their small or medium-sized projects, which has inherently been a pretty difficult thing due to problems like low liquidity and whatnot. So they've been working on that, and yeah, I think it's really interesting that they're combining AI and DeFi technology as well. So yeah, that's been very interesting. I'm not sure if Turing has gone into the article, but I'm sure I saw you brought it up the other day. So yeah, that's something that really interested me. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. We will go back to Ridvan and then Luam, and I'll make sure to mention you again, Brento, but you'll be after Luam, and then to Carl. So yeah, Ridvan, what have you been reading over these past 2 weeks?
Verified random function by Chainlink. I read about that because I found that interesting, and then I also read about of course, Mixicals.
What is that? If you can explain.
And FSS. So let me start with the random verified function. VRF. VRF is verified random function. Sorry, I'm mixing up the acronyms. Basically, it guarantees you that things are random. So let's say if you play a game, right, a video game, and you kill a monster and a loot drops, right? Typically, it's generated by RNG, but now you can also verify the RNG, where it comes from, and that it really is random. So people won't really be concerned that, okay, some maybe a third party can control the drop rate, if you will, of the loot or the outcome of a game or whatever, like the roll of the dice. So it basically, through an oracle, verifies that whatever is created there is random. So you have a guarantee that it really is random, as to put it like that in simple terms. And then I also been reading about Chainlink's FSS, which is called Fair Sequence Service. So basically, I think I talked about it the last time. There's something called front running. And front running attacks is a typical problem that happens in DeFi because what it happens is, let's say Alice wants to buy some apples from Bob, right? And Alice puts the contract out. I want to buy 10 apples from Bob at the current price for, let's say, $2, right? And it gets put in the ledger, and then Carol sees it. Hey, Alice wants to buy apples from Bob for $2. So what Carol does, she rushes in and overtakes Alice in her fancy car and gets those apples for $2 before Alice can get it. And then when Alice arrives, well, tough luck. The apples were sold for $2. You got to pay a bit more now, right? And that's called front running attack, which is actually also a problem in traditional stocks. And now it's also a problem in DeFi, where people then pay a little bit more ether in gas, right, to front run the other person and get ahead. So with Chainlink Fair Sequence Services, it basically guarantees you through an Oracle network that you are the first one to put that order in, and thus the contract becomes tamper-proof, and the other person can front run ahead of you and basically steal, if you will. Not really steal, but get ahead of you and buy, and then make you forced to, first of all, you have to pay the gas that you lost, the ether gas, right? Now you got to do that all over again. And then you again have to pay more, so you can make sure that you don't get front run. So you're both saving gas, you also save time. So it's pretty smooth and pretty nice that Chainlink is solving this problem. Chainlink is basically solving every problem you can think of when it comes to crypto. I'm not kidding, man. If there's a problem, Chainlink solves it.
Once again, before I let Luam go, none of us are financial advisors. Nothing that we say is investment advice. If you act on any of the information that we share, you are acting on that on your own behalf, and you are either going to earn all of the gains, or you are going to have to deal with all of the losses.
You're going to take the punches. You're going to take the punches.
Do your own research.
Yeah.
That's a very... man, I'm so tired of hearing that. But no,
I'm going to get that tattooed on my forehead.
Yeah, right. Just get it tattooed somewhere.
Right, and what's the other thing? Remember your seed? Isn't that the other part?
Not your keys, not your coin.
Right.
Basically.
Not your keys, not your coin. Yeah. That's another thing to remember.
Yeah, thank you, Ridvan. I do appreciate it. Luam, go ahead.
I wanted to kind of dig deep. So first, I'll say over the past, I guess, 2 weeks, what I've been reading, um, I kind of dove deeper into its proof of stake. I really try to take a deeper dive into proof of stake and how that's going to take place between now and or how Ethereum is going to actually roll that out. It's one of the things that they're not doing it now. They're still in a proof of work system, which is, I believe, I kind of wanted to dig in to what Ridvan was saying about the the front running attack, which is, it seems like that's based on the proof of work system as it is, or is that something that uh, is that a problem in the proof of stake system? Like, because these are two totally. Well, do we need to break it down, the difference between the two?
Yeah.
This is like an application level attack.
Okay.
Essentially, the rhythm of security fixes for the last 3 decades has sort of been OS level gets hardened, firewall network level gets hardened, and then the application level starts being continuously reinvented and hardened simultaneously. So we ping pong back and forth, new features, new exploits.
Can you briefly describe the difference between proof of work and proof of stake, if that's possible, Lewin?
Yes. So we can actually break it down just a little bit more. We're gonna start. This is one of the things I thought about, is like, how do I relay this information as cleanly as possible to people? So
well, actually, here we'll pause. We'll let Brento get in on what he's been reading.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead.
I'll keep it very short. So I've really thought of it as a hierarchy, like a hierarchy of like distributed ledger. First, I wanted to kind of get away from the using the term like blockchain and cryptocurrency. Like, I keep seeing them being used interchangeably, and it makes me very upset. So I want to start saying, I try to say distributed ledger more, and I want to rearrange it as more of a hierarchy, or organize it in a way. At the very bottom of that hierarchy is transactions, like just purely transactions. They tend to have a header and some data attached to it. Next up, you have blocks, or it tends to be, or the consensus algorithm. So the consensus algorithm is the way that all these independent nodes come into agreement about the current state of the entire system, which is related to the question I just asked Ridvan. Above that, you have these whole chains, like whole ledgers, like just a singular ledger in and of itself. They can be different depending on which consensus algorithm is being used. So Bitcoin uses proof of work, so does Ethereum. So you may find some other chains that use something else. Proof of authority, I guess I came across that. That would be something like a CA certificate that you get for your website, like a TLS certificate. And there's some other ones I'll try to link to them as well. And above that, above a consensus algorithm, would be I guess you could say, application layer. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. Would you disagree? Maybe.
Sounds fine.
An application. Well, let's look at it this way. An application is just using both these chains, these independent chains. It could be, and sort of weaving them together in a way via their transactions, sort of kind of tying them all together, and that's the application. Like, remember how early we said the transactions, they could be just data, but in this case, in some cases, they're code. It's code in there as well. It doesn't always have to be that. It could just be information. Yes.
Go ahead, Carl.
So would you consider, how far would you consider the technology of underlying smart contracts to go into this application layer? Is this the kind of thing where there are some very well-known things like the Chainlink verified random? Is that something like a infrastructure level smart contract, or is that something completely separate?
I would say yes. I know I read over the past 2 weeks that you can't do floating point numbers on a smart contract. You can only use integers in Ethereum, that is. So that says that's something I'm reading up on. I'm very curious about, because there's like statistical stuff that could be interesting in there.
Right.
So,
Well, the way that floating point works is it's called two's complement, and you can sort of Google this, but basically you're just representing everything as portions of a fraction, and so that's how floating point works in computer science. But choosing not to implement that inside of smart contract Ethereum means that there is a lot more certainty as to how precise your numbers are. There's a concept called machine epsilon, where the uncertainty, where your number gets really, really tightly constrained by the two's complement representation, and that could create surprising defects in your contract. So it's probably a pretty good security feature, just not to have it by default.
awesome. That's good stuff.
Can I expand on what it does, by the way? So if you have the smart contract, right, and you need that random number, what the smart contract does is actually it connects it to the Chainlink oracle that is specifically running this verifiable randomness function, and then you send it with your your private key, right? It gets sent to the oracle node, and then it generates the randomness, and then it returns back to the contract. So basically, therefore, it guarantees it without the randomness being set by whatever parameters is in the contract. So you get basically a verified, trusted, zero knowledge randomness function put back in.
And the oracles have to communicate with, there's a group of them, right? It has to communicate with a group of nodes, right? Not
Well,
just
the
a
more
single.
oracle nodes there are, the more redundant it will be, which is good for safety, especially if it's decentralized. So it's always a good thing to have more oracle nodes connected to your smart contract, whatever it is, just for redundancy.
I think it's worth noting. Yeah, let me just say real quick. I think it's worth noting how difficult it is to actually like create any kind of randomness on a computer, which is why this is so interesting to me. That like trying to create any kind of like perfectly random thing is not really a solved problem. So yeah, the fact that Chainlink is taking this on is again like another thing that's like, okay, another one in their basket. All right.
That was wonderful. Okay, so we have two more people to go through, and then I have a very basic question that I think I want to get started with, because there's been one that's been coming to me more and more frequently, and I want to hear everybody's thoughts on it. Go ahead, Brento.
Oh, yeah. So, no, all I've really been paying attention to has been the Ether 2, Ethereum 2.0 contract that's currently being, the deposit contract that's currently being filled up. And so I don't know. I think talking about Ethereum 2.0 is probably what I'm most interested in talking about today. But that's it. But I think that's and the difference between proof of stake and proof of work as it's currently implemented right now. But again, I'm actually learning a lot. So I'm just going.
Okay, and Carl.
There's my mute button. I'm mostly along for the ride, putting in my observations on crypto, but I did hear about a long sequence attack in the chat, and I'm definitely excited to sort of go back and forth on this application level attack that we had. Don't worry, it's like it's more, I guess it's sort of a application level attack that one vendor was subject to, and then there was a sequence involved in like this flash loan, and so I'm really excited. I forget who tipped us off to that, but I want to hear about it.
All right, so to get like my basic question out of the way, the one that's been coming to me frequently is, and it's going to be like multiple questions that I'm going to try to form into one. Why should the working class care about blockchain? Is it bad that 98% of the people that seem to be involved in this space are white libertarian guys? Is there, is there a benefit to like the working class people? And additionally, so like I'm sitting here and I'm trying to like listen through all this with you, and I'm not the smartest person, but I'm also not like the unsmartest person, even though saying it that way, it may sound that way. And this goes well over my head. and I've been putting in hours to try to learn and read and watch videos and so forth. So the question that I'm really trying to ask is like, does any of what we're discussing matter to the everyday individual? And Luam, you mentioned that you're working toward on trying to understand how to explain these concepts in the most like simple and basic of terms. That way they can be like processed by the masses. So the frame of the question is just is it a problem that this is being apparently utilized by the Austrian school of thought, or like the finance world, or the libertarian world, or the white investment world, or so forth? Is any of what we're discussing beneficial to the working class? And how can we continue to try to utilize the knowledge that we're kind of building as a group here in order to actually get information out in a concise way that it will be somewhat understandable?
I want to jump on that. So I actually worked in finance in a personal microfinance product for the unbanked. This is the industry term is essentially someone who doesn't hold a traditional bank account. The fees are too high, or their documents aren't in order, or they don't have the personal facilities or the family facilities that have put essentially a couple $100s into their name so that they can hold just personal amounts of finance. And so what you will have is essentially a giant industry built on seeking rent from the people who are working. Cracker Barrel would use our product to pay their employees. And then if the employees didn't opt out in the right way, we would make money off of them. We would be making money off of the payment card that they used, that they got their paycheck on. And so we would be gathering all the Visa transaction fees instead of their traditional bank. And that was this microfinance product that TSYS produced in Austin, Texas. There's also a huge relationship with payday lending, and there's also a huge relationship of every place that has a credit card terminal. They're called acquiring partners. So this is a multi-tier system where businesses just seeking rent on every transaction, and especially if you're unbanked, your finances are vulnerable to companies that are going to use their business partnerships just to siphon money off of you.
Yeah. And to follow up on that, one of the things that DeFi especially is useful for to the working class is that it's permissionless. You don't need permission from your bank anymore to like choose to invest or how you make money with your money anymore. Generally, what you do is, typically in real life, you want to buy a business or whatever, you have to take a bank loan from the bank, right? And then the bank wants some sort of guarantee that you can pay it back, or they'll look at your finances and say, we don't know, application denied, we don't think you can pay it back. So here with DeFi, for example, you get to decide what you do with your assets, right? And because it's in a decentralized, permissionless way, you don't need permission from anything else. All you need to do is be able to provide the assets that's requested, right? And if you have a little asset, you can still get something out of it. Obviously, you can't get as much. Let's say we use an arbitrary number, right? Let's say 10 Bitcoins and 1 Bitcoin. You can, of course, get more money if you farm, for example, with 10 Bitcoins than you can get with 1 Bitcoin. But the idea is you can still farm with 1 Bitcoin. And then nobody can stop you. And nobody can say, no, you can't do that. So this is your way to control your own finances.
So a question that will be a little bit of a devil's advocate question. Isn't at the moment right now a bank account required to purchase crypto?
Maybe only through like legal channels. No. Yeah. But yeah,
so like, is there
PayPal, Robinhood, what's the other one?
Robinhood requires a bank account.
Cash App, like they're all kind of connected to it. They're really trying to do. I see it as they're trying to, they're doing it by the book. They're really trying to keep things consistent. The problem with that, I guess my 2 cents, going to your question earlier, Turing, about why should the working class care? I would say first, using technology, you don't want it can outpace things very quickly. Right now, it's an open field. It's a very big open field. and just seeding space is not the right thing to do. So I know there's a lot of people who just say they get I understand where it comes from. People say, yo, learn the code. Like what? Like, no, what the heck? You're not gonna tell me I'm a freaking coal miner. Why the fuck? Like, like they get out of here with that. I get that. I understand that. That's not the only thing, but you can't just like say, oh, like this stuff is how can this stuff help us? How can we really use it in our lives? And like I said in last time, I said cryptography is a very, very strong thing. It's a very strong thing. It's like it's a tool, and it can be used if we don't like really try to reorganize things around it, or it can be used in a harmful way.
Yeah, I've begun to get more and more interested. I'll kick it back to you very soon, Carl.
Oh, yeah.
I started to get more interested as I've been seeing this rollout of central bank digital coins and seeing more of a digitization of everything that's taking place. So it kind of feels to me that regardless of if I want cryptography to become a part of my life or not, regardless of if I want DeFi to become a part of my life or not, it does appear that it's coming. And this is kind of where I'm of the type where it's, if other people are going to be using this in order to either have control over my finances or power over my finances or some type of influence on my life, I would at least like to be involved with it somehow in order to not, like you said, not entirely cede all of the ground. Go ahead, Carl.
Oh, I was gonna shout out to we had a Bitcoin ATM in Westlake Center, downtown Seattle, for a while. It looks like that's been taken down, but there are still 2 or 3 of them around the Seattle area, and that's one way you could get into Bitcoin without a bank account.
Well, but could you? How do you put
Yeah.
Do you put in cash and then you get, or how would it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's about a 15% or 16% fee
Jeez.
when you exchange cash for Bitcoin, but it is possible.
Okay. Ouch.
So there's a few ways that you can get hold of Bitcoin without having a bank account. But again, the main goal I think we should be getting to is to really transcend that. And I think a lot of these centralized exchanges, for example, are trying to like have some kind of on ramp. Obviously, they're still the middlemen, and it's something that we really have to try to transcend. But I think for the time being, they can still be like quite useful for people who are just trying to get their hands on some crypto quite easily. But yeah, as was said just now, there's also Bitcoin ATMs popping around. You don't need a bank account. You basically just scan your wallet or your QR code or whatever it is, and then you put the money in, and it just goes straight into that thing. Of course, again, the fees are extremely high, but that's a whole other thing that we need to deal with. But there's also like just in real life peer-to-peer thing. I can't remember the exact website, but there's a website that can allow people to like, I don't know, like meet up and exchange cash for some crypto. I can't remember the exact website, but that's also a thing. But yeah, no, onto your question in regards to why the working class should really care about this. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me, someone in the chat just said local bitcoins. That's the website I was talking about, localbitcoins.com, I believe it is. And so actually, no. First, I'll talk about the inequality in this space, because this is something that has played on my mind as well. Because when it comes to any like really advanced technology, obviously there's going to be a premium on the people who can get access to that knowledge, right? Because obviously, if someone's in a like low socioeconomic position and they can't have access to the resources to get into the positions where they can learn about this high level stuff. But yeah, no, I think that is changing for the better. I think. I've seen a lot more people come into the space that are from developing countries, for example, and even people from like other kind of diverse backgrounds too. So that's something that really have to try to push, because when I hear some of these conversations, it is slightly ironic that like they're talking about helping the people in developing countries, but then there's never anyone really there to represent themselves at the same time, which seems a bit strange. But again, I do feel like that's changing to some extent, especially considering how more and more people are getting access to the internet, and of course you can have more people that just build their own platforms and share their own knowledge and communicate that way. But I'd also say that, and this kind of ties into like DeFi in general. right? Because DeFi, for anyone who doesn't know, it's decentralized finance, and it's sort of the antithesis to centralized traditional finance, which is something that Torian seems to critique quite a lot on his stream, and I enjoy him going after Deutsche Bank and things like that. And yeah, no, the real power of DeFi or decentralized finance is that it can allow like someone in a very low socioeconomic status, someone that's in a developing country, to have this access to the same financial tools as, say, like a high speed trader in Wall Street, for example. There's no barrier, as was said. It's permissionless. It's decentralized, and people can have access to these same tools. So that's really, really important, because there's obviously like a high barrier to entry in regards to like in getting access to insurance or like any kind of finance, really, or being able to build up a kind of credit score, access to land titles and whatnot. There's always a big barrier to entry, and I feel like these technologies are kind of decentralizing that, which I think is really, really good. But no, finally, I think these are very like complicated or relatively complicated technologies, and I do feel like it is in our best interest to kind of bring it down to the layman's level as much as we possibly can, right? Like even as we're talking in this conversation and we're talking about DeFi this, DeFi that, and we haven't even really defined DeFi. People listening for the first time probably don't even know what DeFi means. So yeah, this is kind of the role of, say, like a data analyst in like the sort of whole AI data science field, right? You have like the data science person who's doing all of the advanced stuff, and then you have the data analyst who's really trying to communicate that technology to like someone else in the industry, or someone else that's not even involved, to try to get that understanding across. And I do feel like the technology, it can be quite hard to wrap our heads around various aspects of it, right? Whether we're talking about cryptography, which Liam was talking about earlier, or whether it's understanding the difference between proof of work and proof of stake. But I feel like it's just about developing the skill to communicate the technology in as easy terms as possible. But yeah, also just remembering that at the end of the day, like, it isn't absolutely necessary for every person to be an expert in blockchain technology to benefit from the technology, in the same way that people don't necessarily have to understand the inner workings of HTTP and TCP/IP to get onto social network.
Or their car.
Yeah, basically, yeah,
Just
exactly.
get in their
They don't
car
know how
and
the
they
motor
drive.
works and
Right.
drive. Yeah, exactly.
That's how it
So,
should
yeah.
feel. That's how it should feel. That's how it should
That's a
feel.
good analogy.
The thing that I'm really worried about, though, is like, well, to that point, I would say like a MacBook, right? People really love MacBooks. They love to buy them. When and how much of them, how like how many people really know what goes on in their computer, like, versus somebody like me. I could work on a Raspberry Pi and I'm good. Like, I don't need a heavy computer. I can do everything that I need to do. And some people be like, well, what, so but there's a lot of power in that. There's a ton of power in understanding. To expound on that, I want to say that not obfuscating everything is just a way to entrench certain like groups. It's just like obfuscating to the point to where it's like, well, it's a way to build a walled garden. You got me? Like,
Yeah,
a
I know what you
walled
mean.
garden is
Yeah,
what we don't
definitely.
want. We don't want a walled garden, especially in like a decentralized system. Like, we just don't want a walled garden. If we get like, any of these Chase or any of these other places like making their own sort of like, system out of it, or some way to interact, that you have to go, it somehow has to connect back to them. The only way to go around that is to like get back on the ground and like get to the decentralization part is to like
And I
give it
think
to them directly.
this is the real power of smart contracts, because of any like good smart contract anyway, you can go to the block explorer, you can see exactly what the smart contract is doing, you can even look at the code, it's all right there. But yeah, so yeah, in an optimum world, everyone will have a good understanding of cryptography and whatnot, so that we don't get like bamboozled by people who have a monopoly on knowledge in a particular field or certain products and services. But again, I feel like we can kind of do both at the same time. On the one hand, making sure that we do have control over the technology, while also providing good user experiences as well for people that are not too tech savvy, right?
Go ahead, Brento.
So I'm really not I'm not a programmer, but what kind of got me interested in what made me sort of like take like sort of a leap of faith in the blockchain was just when I kind of understood how powerful it was and like all of the issues that it solves. And so the question of like why should someone who's not involved in programming or the that space be interested in it? It's the same reason you should be interested in email in the 1990s. It's just because it's this borderless, permissionless ability to just send information back and forth, and it's going to change the way everything works. So when you realize what it can do, and all of the issues that it solves, I guess to repeat, is just it seems sort of inevitable. It seems like this inevitable um, evolution, I guess, revolution in
Oh yeah,
technology, and
absolutely.
that feels like why maybe you don't have to understand necessarily how it works, but it's going to affect your life. Period. It's going to happen. So
And this is kind of why I'm really am so thankful that you all are taking time out of your days that we can maybe put something together that can be explanatory for people. Where we can go from talking about something very complex and then get down into kind of like the more like basic definitions and so forth. So I'm hoping that eventually, this will be something that people could look up and say like, oh, okay, I learned a little bit here, I learned a little bit there. Um,
Let me can I say one other thing about what is that big revolution, right? So the revolution in terms of technology that I see is we're not talking about a centralized computer. Like we're not a single computer, not your smartphone, not your one computer. We're talking a world computer. Like people connecting their computers together and actually using them for a task, which is a very big thing, and it can be anything they want it to be. That's put very shortly. That's kind of the big breakthrough here.
Yeah, and
I,
I'd
I
like to
want
add
to
that.
go ahead.
Well, I'd also like to add one of the things that it's really going to revolutionize the world through what blockchain adds, especially smart contracts. We no longer have to rely on trust anymore. Now everything is mathematically proven. Okay, so if we engage in a contract with somebody, we don't have to worry about some malicious third-party controlling entity. Example: if you drive an Uber, right, you use the app, you pay the app, the driver through the app. But Uber, the company, is basically dictating the terms and conditions, right? It acts as the third party. So with smart contract, it's just between you and me, and you don't have to worry about paying up or if the other guy upheld his end of the argument. It's just set in stone now, and it removes all trust. And from that point on, we can kind of like move on as a civilization without having to worry about who does what and will my money be safe, will this product be delivered, etc., etc. And
and
I
doesn't
think that's a
this
beautiful thing.
does Go ahead.
I
I
was
was gonna
just gonna
say, or will this vote be cast?
here's
Right.
I,
Think about
Sorry,
it.
I want to jump on that.
Go ahead.
Is like crypto contracts and crypto chains as the vehicle for policy and especially personal investment in policy. Like I want to see us get to 80% decarbonized electricity today. So I am going to put my stake into 80% clean electricity, and I'm going to purchase my electricity from the grid at 80% or better decarbonized electricity. And just thinking about having a decentralized finance, decentralized markets for carbon, cap and trade, all this exists, but we have to beg and plead our civic leaders to get it actually implemented. And right now in Seattle, they're just not doing it. And that would be amazing if I could, talk to Nori and say, yeah, I want to put my electricity bill on your verified carbon chain.
That's great. I think
I was,
one thing to quickly add is that this kind of ties in everything. I think is that it gives us the opportunity to bring about a more true shared economy, so to speak. Right, everyone's so excited about Uber and Airbnb and all these kinds of apps, but it's just more or less the same, right? You have the company who's dictating all the
It's
rules
worse.
and regulations. Yeah. They try to class their employees as contractors, but they basically treat them as employees without the kinds of benefits that an actual employee would get. And they dictate the prices and whatnot, which is why people can work God knows how many hours driving a car, riding a bike, and not even have enough or make enough money to feed themselves and their family. And on the flip side, then you have, you know, the customers who I saw a picture the other day of someone ordering from Uber Eats or whatever, and they got like a $10 discount, and then in the final thing, they managed to bump that $10. They basically erased those $10 by including all these kinds of extra fees that the company themselves will just
Yeah,
scoop off the top.
I actually I had a $30 off Uber Eats like coupon that came through, and I was gonna use it, but then there was, I think it was like a $7.95 transaction fee, like a $4.95 processing fee. There was a delivery fee, and I was just
Oh my
like,
God.
how do
Yeah,
like,
that's
one, it made me think like, how can people ever afford even to use like Uber Eats? And
Yeah.
it also made me think like, I used to be a delivery driver for Damon's, and I used to be a delivery driver for Chili's, and like they charged, I don't know, like $3 or something like that. Like, I mean, they, you know, one of them had a company vehicle, so like I don't have any kind of problem, you know, similar to like for me, I use PayPal to monetize my channel, and they charge me like a 5% transaction fee, which like I get it, you know, they need to like make, you know, something somehow. It's a lot better than Amazon charging you a 50%, you know, transaction fee for subs and so forth. So yeah, this gig economy, it's just advancing the precariat economy even further. Brento, you wanted to. You
I
wanted to
just
say
wanted to say
something, then I had
something.
a question about
Sure.
voting, then I had a question about a book, and then I wanted to open it up to deeper dive topics that people wanted to get into their specializations on.
Yeah. I just want to say something about something Ridvan said, which is something you hear all the time, and I think it's like a major part of blockchains. They call it trustless, right? And they say like it removes trust. And within, I think the blockchain community and people that like speak it, and you know, Noah, that is like something that they understand. It's like you don't have to trust people. Trust isn't a factor, right? So it's implicit. But I think to anyone outside, when you say it's trustless or it removes trust, that has like a negative connotation, and it's just I think it's like it's a misnomer for some people. The idea that you're operating in a trustless system, it just is something that I think if people hear that initially and it's not explained to them why trust is removed or why that's a benefit, I think it's something that makes people go, "What? I trustless?
Yeah.
You don't trust this person? You don't trust who you're working with? You know,
Maybe
like
maybe
it's a
maybe
yeah.
for me to try to explain a little of what like Brento is kind of like discussing. So let's say that I am like I go to the corner store, and I want to use my debit card to make a payment, and then I swipe it through their like little type of thing. Myself and that vendor are trusting our banks in order to transfer the currency back and forth. So this is where the old system relies on the trust. So we're trusting that the payment processing and all that kind of stuff is going to work out. Now, what Ridvan was explaining about smart contracts and why it would be this quote unquote trustless is because when you are working with a system that is mathematically based or mathematically backed, there isn't an intermediary, there isn't a third party, there isn't an option for arbitration, there isn't having to deal with like a different institution. You're going on something that is, once these mathematic terms and conditions would be hit and struck, then whatever contract you're doing, whatever smart contract you're doing, whatever payment you're doing, this is where the trustless part comes in. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah. Oh, and I understand what it means. I just think that it's something. I think it's like a misnomer for many people who wouldn't understand or who are not familiar with the space. You know.
I think another thing that we can add in is that we're not trusting. It's not like we're not trusting anything at all. It's that we are basically abstracting trust away to the actual math and physics as well.
Fair.
Thinking about we don't have to trust each other, but we trust this protocol, which is determined by mathematics, and this is how we know that things are secure and whatnot.
So
and I think one thing to add is that I do think that this is something that can be very, very useful for people who are trying to figure out or try to talk to try to figure out how to create societies that would traditionally have been like very, very difficult to pull off. So like I've been like for I don't know, for the past year or so, I've been seeing so many debates about like anarchism versus socialism and whatnot, then or capitalism versus whatever kind of ideology, and it always gets to this point where they're like, "Oh, how are you gonna do this? How are you gonna do that? How are you gonna trust that this person's gonna do that?" And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, smart contracts. Use the smart contracts and problem solve. And that, I feel like that in and of itself is just so powerful, because it's like it can really solve a lot of problems that we've had in the past, trying to create these societies that we have to rely on particular people and their morals to not go bad, or to not like take all the money and the power for themselves, basically.
I think you're right. I just will add this, and this might take us down a different path, so we don't have to go there. But I think what smart contracts would solve, by making everything very simple and clean cut and have no questions, it would also sort of like expose human flaws. So everything that humans don't do right would be very like stark. So it's like people relying on smart contracts would make mistakes, and they would just wreck themselves. Some people would get wrecked. A lot of people would get wrecked, I think, by smart contracts.
Absolutely.
Well,
The-
without a doubt, I think one of the services that's going to come is going to be like people that will write smart contracts for other people. So you say, okay, I want this to happen if this happens, right? And I want these contingencies to be in place. And then somebody will code it, like people that are like smart at coding. So that's probably going to be one of the services that will be offered from programmers to regular people that don't really know how to code. And considering that so many people will learn how to code, the services will probably also be cheap. But then, of course, the higher quality of the code, the more you'll have to pay. And of course, you'll also probably have to pay for some sort of the Oracle services that will be used.
To that, I'd say that's like that goes into like open source free software type. It's going to go into that space, and that's another. I think that's a different topic for another day. But because there's a lot of things that can. I don't know. It's a very certain issue with licensing, and how do you license contracts, I guess you could say.
Two things that I did want to bring up before, we are going to go into like the deeper topics that each person kind of wanted to speak about, was on my book suggestions list, a book by Isaiah Jackson came up called Bitcoin and Black America. And I was wondering, had anybody ever heard of the book before?
Nope.
I have
not. No.
So the little blurb about it says, it was written July 9th, 2019. It says, ready for a change in black economics, join the Bitcoin revolution. Bitcoin and Black America is a dynamic new book that explores the synergy between black economics, Bitcoin, and blockchain technology. The global financial system is changing, and the digital revolution will not be televised. Explore how to incorporate Bitcoin into your business, job, and educational institution. This book also outlines the need for separation from the racist banking system and a comprehensive list of black professionals actively working in the blockchain industry. And I just wanted to bring it up because since we were talking about like how could blockchain technology work for like different classes or for the working class or so forth, I just wondered if anybody was familiar with this one at all.
No, I'm not familiar with the book, but it kind of brings up, like, there was a question in the chat that was sort of similar to that, like, why not just use the bank? And you mentioned like the banks could be like races or classes or whatever, and so if you have let's say you have a decent paying job, right? And you want to take a loan from the bank. Well, the bank wants some guarantee that you have the X amount of disposable income after you paid your rent, food, etc., in order to pay back your loan. Well, with, for example, lending protocol like, I don't know, Aave or whatever, instead of you showing that you have disposable income, why not just buy a token that you stake as a collateral and then take a loan from that? Not to mention that you can also put in whatever the liquidation price is, and then you can use whatever you loan to increase your own funds by, let's say, buying more tokens of whatever project you feel is going to go up, or maybe put it in some sort of DeFi protocol and farm a shitcoin, to use that term, because it is a popular term, and earn money that way and then pay it back. So you can't really make much money with the bank with your money that you can make if you instead buy a token, put that as collateral, set a liquidation price, use that money that you then borrowed to buy another token or whatever, or farm with it, and then get more money back. And here it's just based on smart contract. Nobody's going to check your background. Nobody's going to check like how much money do you make in a year. What color are you? What race are you? Which neighborhood do you live in? What's the area worth? The property area worth, etc., etc. It's just math now. It's just numbers.
So I'm going to push back just a little bit on that and say that I don't necessarily believe that I'm not convinced that completely convinced that you can erode away racism with this technology, only because due to the fact that there's a lot of unless there's like some type of UBI system, or unless there's just like an entirely change in, I guess, in some, or just general how our economic system, or I guess you could say, you want to throw capitalism in there. Yeah, you gotta deal with just getting away from value, which is the thing that I really like to think about. How do we get there? I know in the interim, we're gonna have to deal with the financial system as it is. And going back to what you said earlier, when you first started talking about this, Turing, when you said there's a lot of libertarian guys, like, yeah, there's a lot of libertarian dudes who got a lot of certain opinions that like they'll probably disagree with me on a number of things. Is this system like racism? Like, well, most of the people here, I mean, in order to be one of the early investors in Ethereum, you were probably one of the early investors in Bitcoin. Like you were one of those guys. And if you want to get into, maybe there's probably in Chainlink, there's some early guys who got into who got into Ethereum first. And now with proof of stake, you're going to need a sizable amount of Ethereum in order to validate the chain. And this goes into something that I would want to kind of talk about is how proof of stake, is that a fair, just, or is that a fair system? Is it, it's something that I am very like kind of trying to figure out. Like, I understand it uses less energy, which I do like that idea, but I don't think that is going to be the I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out. I'm totally not convinced on proof of stake at this moment, because
I think
final two
what
things
you're trying to say
go
is that
ahead.
proof of stake. I think what the 10b2. Can I? What did you just say? Lumen.
Lumen. Lumen. Call me Lumen.
Yeah, I think what Lumen is trying to say is that proof of stake is kind of inherently favorable towards those that have a lot, because they can stake more, right? And that's a fair critique, because why? And it can also be same use for like an Oracle node, right? If you have a lot of chain links and you can stake that in Oracle node, it's more likely that you'll attract more people to use your node because you stake more. So I think one of the solutions could be you pool. There's a staking pool, so people with small amounts can then pool together and then share it then fairly.
Yeah.
Okay. Two super quick. Oh shit, I forgot one of them. Okay, I guess. Well, it was important, but I did forget it. Go ahead, Brento, and see if I can remember.
The only thing I've heard on that basically is, I think they asked Vitalik about that. Vitalik, just for anyone watching, is that creator of Ethereum, or one of them. So he said basically it's like, yeah, you do need like a deposit, you need like an investment to stake, but you also need an investment to basically run proof of work and run a computer and secure the network that way. So you need some kind of investment no matter what. In this way, like, you're not necessarily competing, and you don't have to just take like a hardware investment where now you have to like re-up your hardware every year to compete with giant mining pools. You just basically, you can purchase Ethereum and waste electricity and all that. There's lots of other benefits, but as far as like the fairness of whether or not you're helping to validate the chain and secure the chain, you could purchase a little bit and then pool it with others and then just get some small return, and that's open to everyone and anyone. And I don't know if you're ever going to be, how do you secure a chain based on people who don't have any stake in securing it, right? Like, if you're going to secure it some way, you have to be able to have some kind of reliance on people to be telling the truth, right?
So I think to that, I don't have an answer to that question, but I would say, explore other consensus algorithms. One that I think is very interesting to me is some type of proof of like personhood, which is like, how do we prove an individual is some combination between proof of stake and like proof of personhood, like proving that an individual like exists and they are an actual person, and they can use that personhood to then sort of create almost like a UBI system in a way. I'm kind of talking out my ass right now, but I'm just kind of like trying to work through how do we get past this problem of, some people having, more currency than others, and using that as a, because you get interest off of your stake, right?
Well, yeah, I think he kind of designed the chain a little bit to do that. It's like basically, I don't think you can, like, I think each node is 32 ETH, right? And it's like
Yeah.
you can't have like a super node of like 32,000 ETH, and so each node is essentially equal in its weight on the chain because they're all now. Okay, I shouldn't go any more further because this is just literally my understanding of it, which I would not actually like to teach other people because I don't know it that well. But I do think that they designed it so that each node is 32 ether, so that there's not one super power node of like 32,000 controlling the chain, and it's bouncing between all three. So it's at least capped at like 32 ether of influence per node. I suppose. I'm repeating myself.
Off topic again, but to return to the book that I mentioned, I did remember what I wanted to mention. I found a video recently that went through kind of like the media, the cultural, and like the movie perceptions that were put forward about like blockchains and about cryptocurrencies. And it seemed that from very early on, it was targeting like white financial types. So I just wanted to like bring to the forefront that it seems to be that it is going to be important how these different pieces are going to be like depicted in culture as to like who is going to be adopting them, and that seemed to be like very influential in like the different groups of people that were kind of like getting involved with it. The final question that I did want to ask, and then I want to be able to open it up to all of your expertise. And the thing that I wanted to ask is kind of what Mammoth Waffle brought up, and Carl, you brought this up a little bit before. So the question that I kind of want to ask is there a way to use blockchain to make voting easier, better, and like more useful for us? Like how can this technology help the voting process?
Well, I want to blow this up a bit. Look at using blockchain to improve the consensus process rather than voting. When you're talking about voting has a net benefit and a net cost, and that is the cost is we allow politicians to sell to us as voters their policy packages, and so we're essentially bidding on a single policy package and our trust in that person, where we should be considering what minute policies would we like to see enacted, and it either vote somehow or stake somehow on those policies.
Rough consensus, right? Like just very rough consensus. Yeah, I see that. So is it more, would you say, like a direct, much more direct democratic system?
Or consensus voting for an anarchistic society. Essentially, if you had a micro voting on individual policies, you could form up policies where 100% of the people participating in that contract agreed with the policy. So that's I guess to sort of expand on it, that is the idea of a consensus voting system. If you want to say, like, I'm a big energy geek, so let's break it down. Let's say that you wanted to have 100% consensus on how we produced energy for the city of Seattle. And then that would have to spread. It would have to be 100% consensus in everyone who fed in the materials and all the conditions that gave us that energy. So we would have to say, yeah, we want solar and wind, and then that consensus, the consequences of that consensus would spread to China, where they're building these things, and they'd say, no, you're asking too much from us. You're either not going to pay us well enough, or you're going to make us pollute our community. And so they say, okay, we can't go to China. We have to go to our local community. We don't want to have an externality. We're going to put it in Spokane. And Spokane says, no, we don't agree. And so then we have to have this silicon smelter in our own community in order to get the solar panels. And that's the kind of idea that consensus, that anarchistic consensus voting would mean that there's not a great conflict in trade because we have to unanimously consent to whatever policy we're implementing.
Does that get beaten by another model, though? Does that get beaten by a model that would not be anarchistic voting?
Right. Well, yeah, because people hold power, and those who hold power, who create hierarchies that refute anarchistic principles, are able to, capture these externalities and basically force it on China, to force it on Spokane, where they're building a silicon smelter.
Oh, I have something to add that can possibly tie it back to the previous question about the book that Turing mentioned, and that is the fact that voter fraud has been a really, really big problem. Well, not voter. I mean, voter suppression. That's what I meant to say. Voter suppression, especially for African Americans, which is what I've been looking into for a little while. And in particular, you have, say, like the whole, emancipation of enslaved Africans, which was supposed to allow them to have all these kinds of freedoms, but then all of a sudden you had major pushback, and you had voter suppression and whatnot. And we're still seeing the same kinds of things today. I'm sure many of you have seen videos of certain people saying, oh, it only takes 10 minutes to go down and vote. And again, this is not a question specifically on electoralism per se, but I think it just goes to show just how bad it still is. You have people saying, oh, it's only going to take 10 minutes to vote, and then we can clearly see videos of people waiting at lines that stretch around the block several times over, right? And so if you can do that on a blockchain, right, we don't even need to really leave our homes while still guaranteeing the same, if not more, security in that regard. And of course, that can extend well beyond electoralism, but also just to more direct forms of democracy as well. So all these options open themselves up to us when we consider the latest technologies that we have available to us, as opposed to staying with centuries old mechanisms that are clearly broken.
I have a joke, Loom, and then you're up, and then we can go into the deep dives. I think the person that you're referencing, to throw some shade on them as well, I think that was the worst take that I've ever heard them say. Out of like any of the books of theirs that I've read, of any of the speeches of theirs that I've like listened to, I actually couldn't believe that he thought that that's how voting worked for everybody in the country. It was just, it was ridiculous. Lewin, go ahead.
Yeah, I would add to what Saber said is not only will it make things more transparent, but also have more features. Like, I think that's one thing you can really sell to people in terms of like voting, is having more features in since it's contracts, it's code. We can I know we can't do floating point numbers, but you can maybe implement ranked choice everywhere. Implement, I don't know, freaking, you want to be really crazy with it, I don't know, split votes or something. It's just you can do some interesting things that maybe that we probably haven't considered in the past. And to another point that I like to make to voting is, I don't believe that blockchain or distributed ledger tech in and of itself will get us there from an abstract point. Not from the software level. That's going to have to go all the way down to the hardware as well, in order for it to be as secure as we would like it to be. Just a consideration. What I mean by that is, the ISA, I guess, the instruction set architecture of most computers is either ARM or x86, and these are pretty much licensed out between AMD, Intel, and just the other one. Help me out, guys. ARM.
So, I have a feeling that Ridvan is about to say that's something that Chainlink is working on.
Yes, they're actually released this. Everpedia is using Chainlink oracles to track U.S. election results, and they did it this election. So that's another problem Chainlink solves.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, it's hard not to shield it, because every problem you guys mentioned, Chainlink solves it.
So here's where I did want to like open up into like kind of like a deeper dive like section. We did our introduction. It ended up being like an hour long introduction, and that's been wonderful. So Ridvan, how about we start with you? What's something that you kind of wanted to like really like expand on, or yeah, we'll start with you, and then we'll, if I'm not doing a good job of like kicking it from one person to the next, just jump in and say as well.
Okay, I'll try to not give a meme response this time by saying buy Chainlink or stay poor, which is still my honest opinion. But
Oh man.
honestly, the reason why I'm so focused on Chainlink is because, first of all, you have probably the most academically serious people in Chainlink or working closely with Chainlink. And one of the things that we talks about, especially with power and proof of work and scaling and such like that, there's a project called Off-Chain Labs, and it's led by Ed Felton. Those are, maybe some of you have heard of Ed Felton, but Ed Felton used to be the CTO of the White House. Very smart guy. And he's working on Arbitrum with Off-Chain Labs. And their goal is to actually scale Ethereum on layer 1 using Arbitrum rollups. I'm not too much knowledgeable about the technical detail, but their goal is definitely to reduce the transaction cost by 1,000 and the transaction speed increased it by 1,000, right? Without having to mine so much and use so much power. So when you look at that, and then you look at Everpedia and you see how they're using oracles, and you look at the China's blockchain service network, how they're using oracles, you can definitely see that oracles is very important in the blockchain space because it's the only way that you can gather off-chain legacy data and make it work with the new blockchain data that's coming about, right? Because right now, majority of data is off-chain in the legacy systems. It's not on a blockchain. It's on a PC somewhere on a server or whatever. So Chainlink is basically the missing piece, and that's why there's so much focus on it, and that's why they're getting partners every day. You look at and now we can see the actual real results, like Everpedia, which is using the Chainlink for the US track election. You can also see now companies like T-Systems from Deutsche Telekom, the video that you just watched, by the way, I think a few days ago, they're now also offering Chainlink Oracle nodes as a service. So oracles are definitely going to be part of this future. And the reason why I'm so hyped about it is because, one, you stake your own tokens inside those oracles, and you basically guarantee that you're delivering the truth. And you can also see it live working. Not many projects now in the blockchain space where you can see it working. And if you want to see it work, you just go to feeds.chain.link, and there you can see, for example, working price feeds right now and who's using them and which Oracle nodes are providing them. It's super cool to actually see the heartbeat of it. So if you want the exact price of Bitcoin right now, go to that, click Bitcoin / USDTC, and there you can see the exact price of Bitcoin and who's providing it. So that's why I'm super excited about. And also all the stuff that we're afraid about that blockchain will do, for example, tracking our privacy, and because everything is on the ledger, well, they're solving that too with Mexicos and Deco. And Deco is something I think everybody should look at. Everybody should go and look up Deco, what it is. It's simply explained, and it will basically relax you and say, hey, my privacy is safe. I don't have to worry about some government or some authority or some entity tracking my every move. I can still remain private and anonymous on the internet. So I don't know, guys. What can I say without sounding like a shill? But I love Chainlink.
Embrace it. Embrace the shill.
Embrace it.
We have to get one person who shills for like each. We need one person to each have like a coin. Next time.
I got mine. Litecoin, guys. Litecoin.
Yo,
Litecoin. Litecoin to the moon.
Next time I'll get like an image for each person of like which project you're most like excited for. And somebody actually reached out and said that they wanted to make like a little digital graphics for our thing. I screwed up my thing on the chat. I realized that like I got frozen about like 30 minutes ago. So I'm trying to read back through everybody's chats. So how about like, okay, let's do something at the moment here before we'll go to Saber, and then you can go into like your deep dive thing. And eventually I wanted to loop back at some point to I don't know who linked the article about the Kenyan farmers and the flood insurance, but I did want to like kind of get to that one at some point. That was you. Okay, so how about we do this for a moment? Does anybody have a question or two for Ridvan about your concerns about Chainlink, or something you don't like that they're doing, or like what would be some questions from the four of you all that, I mean, you're not an expert in Link at the moment, but I mean, you know more than I do.
Yeah, I got a question.
Okay.
Okay, so and this is I kind of understand slightly how this works, but I'd like to hear the Shell talk about this. All right, so obviously when we're talking about these oracles, there is some component that is off chain from what I understand. So how can we ensure that the off chain data is as secure as the on-chain data? And so would it have anything to do with, say, like the zero knowledge proofs or any kind of cryptographic proofs, or does it go like beyond that in terms of the particular companies that are generating these oracles?
Okay, so let's give an example, right? Let's say you want data from an off-chain to deliver, for example, the price of a stock at that amount at the exact time. So generally, you typically use multiple sources. You get a node that uses multiple sources, nodes that uses multiple sources. That way, you guarantee a redundancy factor. And so, if one website delivers faulty data, um, it does. It doesn't compute. It does. It aggregates, right? But they say, okay, this is false. This doesn't add up to the rest, right? And there will be like some form of multisig that compiles it all before it gets sent back to you. So that's called a threshold signature, which should be finished by the end of the year, by the way. And that's the only way they can guarantee that the off-chain data is true. Because if website delivers faulty data and the other websites deliver correct data, then they just take the ones that deliver correct data and say, okay, this is the true because these are the average result and they aggregate it, and then you can say, okay, that's what the price is.
But okay, so here's my follow-up. So how would you know that their information is true? So like, there's a few situations that I can think of. Let's say in many cases, for example, you have journalists will get a hold of some piece of information and then they all report it as if it's true and it's not really true. Another situation that I can think of is if, say, again, we're talking about like a platform or websites that may host themselves on a centralized server or whatnot. But let's say somehow a hacker finds an exploit, hacks all of the a handful of websites, and changes the data. Like, is there any way to ensure that the data itself is true, aside from like as you were describing, right? You pull from a bunch of resources, right? But I've seen many situations where there's been like all the information that comes back, or the majority of information that proliferates itself to the top of our timelines and whatnot, is not necessarily the whole truth. So how do they get around that?
Well, there's something called the Chown Crier system, which is basically some sort of like whenever something is seems to be at fault, what like you described, like some shenanigans is going on, it triggers. It's basically, and it's like it uses a trusted execution environment to basically protect the code. But in terms of off-chain data being manipulated and then delivered to the on-chain, if it happens to all websites, for example, or majority of high-quality trusted website, then there's not much you can do about it. But that's the reason why you use generally high-quality data, right? You want to pay for the data that delivers because you want to minimize that amount of risk. So, I mean, true, what you're saying is could theoretically happen, and there's not much we can do about it. But generally, it shouldn't really happen because there's not much. Companies want to avoid that. They want to protect their product and they want to deliver the correct information. Now, if journalists do that, right, they all agree on let's say the sky is red, right? All the journalists say that. That's opinion. That's subjective.
Well, it was, in California. I don't know if it still is, but it was.
Go ahead. So I'm just gonna say something for maybe Redvan, and then Luam. I saw that you had your hand up, and then Carl, you wanted to ask something too. I'll be super quick. To your question, Saber, isn't the data that gets put into the oracles, doesn't it have to be kind of like measurable or objective? Like, doesn't it need to be like rainfall or temperature or like some type of like actual like measurable piece of data? Not like, okay, I'll stop there. See if Redvan wanted to say something quickly, and then to Luam.
I kind of missed track. What did you say?
Doesn't the data that gets input into the oracles have to be data that can be confirmed? Like, it wouldn't be a piece of reporting. It would have to be like a measurable something that would be measurable. I don't know if that answers
it has
at
to be
all.
quantifiably true. You can't just make data up in the air.
All right.
Because I've actually had the same question, Saber. Luam, go ahead.
Two things. Two things. Like the type of attack they were describing or Saber was describing is called a Sybil attack. It just means that you're faking identities. Essentially, that's commonly the attack that is happening on, I guess you could say, on Twitter. Is like, I can just spawn a bunch of identities on Twitter, post a bunch of messages, and then get something trending, and it's just misinformation. That's what that is. The second thing was to bring up Ridvan. You brought up a trusted execution environment, which is the thing that I say is like another prong to solving this big issue, to solving the whole cryptocurrency, or it's a piece of the puzzle is hardware. And I am a big proponent of open hardware systems. I mean, we can have open software all day. If we don't have open hardware, you want to run something in a trusted execution environment. Like, we all have Intel. We the Snowden leaks, which are connected to this, have revealed that, like, there's trusted execution environments on a lot of the hardware that's out today. Now whether or not there's a backdoor in it, I don't know, but that's something that we also have to like consider. And I don't know how Chainlink is going to handle that. I'm not saying that that it's a cause for, like, I think it's a cause for concern for the whole like space in general, not just any given crypto. It's just like, we're talking about cryptocurrency. We're talking, we need hardware to be open. Open, what's it called? RISC-V is an open architecture, but you still have to worry about like the manufacturing of the cores, which is going to be, I believe, in this decade, the next 10 years, is going to be the thing that you're going to start to hear more about. I know AMD just purchased, or was it NVIDIA purchased ARM, right, recently. I don't know what that means, but it's happening. AMD just made a purchase for an FPGA company, which is pretty sizable. It's Xilinx. It's a pretty big, essentially it's a company that allows people to create sort of chips without having to go through manufacturing again, to simulate chips without going through manufacturing. So I think it's just something that we all, like, the space kind of has to as it grows into itself, it's something that you just have to consider as well.
Well, in terms of the hardware data itself, I guess it's not something Chainlink can solve because they're mostly focused on the software. What I know that they used Intel Software Guard extension. Maybe Carl can speak more about that. I don't know that much about that, to be honest. My technical knowledge is pretty limited. I'm just stressing that. So if whether or not hardware can be manipulated with, and how it's manipulated with, and all these backdoor shenanigans, that's not something that I'm comfortable in terms of what I feel like I'm qualified to answer. But I do know that the Chainlink has a lot of like security layers, mixicals that they're also using, which will protect the privacy of the data, and their time crowd system, which they acquired from Cornell University, which is also helps further expand on TEE, the trusted execution environments. So they're definitely using multiple layers of security, but in terms of how secure they are and backdoors and all that, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
Yeah, I could go into this. So essentially, what happens if you put your application in a virtual machine? So I'm going to talk about the Intel security software guard extensions. One method of exfiltrating data, which includes state, like the internal state of a contract, and being able to either manipulate that or exfiltrate it so that you can predict something about it, would be that you can find a neighboring piece of memory and manipulate that in order to get some data out. Or this is one example of what's called a side chain attack. So essentially you have something like the frequency that your monitor hums at, and that fluctuates, and the code that you're running fluctuates it, and so you're getting information out of that piece of software. It's called a side chain attack. And so what this Intel Secure Guard does is it will actually encrypt the memory segment while it's on the hardware, and that literally randomizes the data so that it's basically impossible to get a side chain out of that isolation. It's also impossible to get lower level root access basically to the same piece of memory in order to straight up pick it out. So other parts of securing software and the secure execution environment is going to involve things like making sure that your return values are verified and have checksums. And so if you have a identity of some kind between both ends of a mathematical formula, you can check that identity before the formula's interpreted and check it afterwards. And these multiple techniques like this is how you have software security assurances. Again, open source, auditing the software, testing it well. These are all layers of defense, and essentially, this level of trust is the only trust in a blockchain technology. And this goes into the thing that I wanted to challenge Ridvan on, which was, is there anything in Chainlink that's going to prevent that the failure of a smart contract like we saw with the Ethereum DAO bailout?
Not that I know of. Chainlink has been attacked, right? It actually happened on SmartCon, and they tried to attack their nodes to get downtime, and they failed. There was no downtime. Chainlink had to, of course, they had to use more Ethereum to keep up the uptime, but so far Chainlink has not been hacked or tampered with. It's always been delivering true data.
Great.
In terms, oh no, never mind. I already answered that guy in chat. So somebody asked me.
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated because I was watching Ethereum when the Ethereum Classic fork happened, because of this DAO bailout, and so there was essentially an exploit in the contracts, and that is the reason we have these two versions of Ethereum. And so I'm always interested in stories about attacks on Chainlink or blockchains.
While we're making this transition, if nobody has any objections, can we go through some of the different attacks or vulnerabilities or forks, or could that be like our next kind of topic of like a deep dive? Does anybody have any objections to that?
No, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because this is also something that I, again, to the audience and to the viewers and to you five, I'm just learning. So, who wants to begin on like what have been some of the attacks? What are some of the vulnerabilities? What have been some of like the successes of hackers and so forth? I'll pause there.
Yeah, okay. I suppose we can go into a bit more detail about what actually happened in the DAO hack. I think that'll be quite, because it is one of those like monumental events that everyone kind of talks about when they talk about Ethereum or blockchain technology or distributed ledger technology in general. So I probably don't know the full details, but from my understanding, a DAO is essentially a decentralized autonomous organization. So what that means is that you have, well, it's kind of in the name. You have this a kind of organization whereby all of the inner workings are handled exclusively by smart contracts. And you may have some kind of governance system. So you may have like a token, for example, which is the case in something like MakerDAO, where they have this Maker governance token, and those people can govern the system. But in terms of the actual DAO itself, it's handled by the smart contracts. So in terms of the hack, from my understanding, so essentially when it comes to programming smart contracts, there's now, because the industry is a lot more advanced than it is now, we have best practices on how we can avoid particular flaws. From my understanding, the DAO hack was happened because of what's known as a re-entrancy attack, and that essentially means that it basically occurs when okay, so how would I describe this in simple terms? So basically, the way smart contracts work is that you have a smart contract, which is programmable code, basically, And you can have other entities obviously interacting with that smart contract, however they may do that. And the cool thing about smart contracts is that you can have like individuals interacting with a smart contract, right? Let's say you wanted to press a button, withdraw funds from your thing, and it goes through the smart contract, it executes the smart contract, and it withdraws your funds. Or you can have other smart contracts interacting with a particular smart contract, right? And so when it comes to programming these smart contracts, there's certain things that you have to do in order to avoid like certain vulnerabilities, because smart contracts are very new technologies. We have there's many problems that can arise. So like it's a new ecosystem, as I just said, right? We don't have the same sort of best practices that we have in something like JavaScript or C or C++. There's also like a really high cost of failure, right? Because we're handling money in these transactions. You're programming the money. And the other thing is that they're just inherently difficult to upgrade, because once you deploy the smart contract to the blockchain, it's there. There are ways to upgrade smart contracts, but that's a whole like other thing, right? So in terms of this re-entrancy attack, what happened was someone basically accessed the smart contract, the DAO smart contract, and there was a bug in the contract itself, whereby the balance of the smart contract, the DAO smart contract, didn't reset until so basically the balance of the actual smart contract, so basically the internal mechanisms of the smart contract, the person has to keep track of the balance of a particular smart contract in order to execute particular functions in it. So typically nowadays what we do is we basically reset the balance first, and then we'd make any kind of interaction that we'd have with the external contract, right? So for example, let's say an external contract wanted to interact with the contract that you're talking about. First, you'd have to check the balance, right? You have to check whether do they have enough funds to do what they're trying to do. And if they do, then you do whatever effect that you're trying to do. So let's say you wanted to figure out, okay, what are you going to change in the contract, right? You're going to change the balance, for example. And then you have to figure out what kind of interactions are to be had, right? So before the DAO smart contract had finished executing, the balance wasn't reset. So the external contract, or whoever it was able to keep basically draining the contract as many times as they wanted to, because they just kept on replaying the code before the actual balance of the smart contract had reset to the amount that it was supposed to. So it's a very complicated way to basically say that the person was able to drain the funds from the smart contract before the balance of the smart contract was reset internally. And this caused a lot of problems, because once the Ethereum Foundation figured out what was going on, they realized that I believe it was over like $100 million or whatever it was trapped inside this smart contract. So many people was excited over this DAO that they invested so much money, right? And so the foundation had to figure out what to do. Were they going to roll back these funds, or are they going to just allow it to carry on? Because obviously this is a big contention, right? When we're talking about blockchains and decentralized technologies, what happens, right? We have to deal with it after the fact. So one side of the Ethereum Foundation wanted to roll it back, because obviously we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, or 100 million at least. And then on the other side, which is the side that forked off into Ethereum Classic, which is like, no, this is obviously bad, but this goes against our ethos, which is what this is supposed to be decentralized. So like completely decentralized. So then they forked off and forked Ethereum off into Ethereum Classic, and then the main Ethereum Foundation team that was okay with rolling back the clock basically stayed on the main thing. So that's essentially what yeah.
I was just gonna say, Loom, can you turn your cam back on?
I think he's on the phone.
Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, Saber.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously, like when we're talking about the specifics of like how this DAO hack happened, it's very, very like complicated. Well, it's relatively complicated, because we're talking about like the actual code itself. So it's quite hard to describe it in simple terms. But this is one of the things that can arise, and so now we have like best practices. You know, for example, you'd have to like check the balance first, as I was talking about, before doing any kind of interaction with external contracts. as something that's kind of established nowadays. So yeah, this is a big thing because like we're talking about so much money, like 6, 7, 8, 9, probably even 10 or 11 figures in the future. So we need to figure this out, like as a community, to figure out how we're actually going to respond to these kinds of issues. So yeah, if anyone else wants to chime in on the hack and whatnot.
Oh, that was a great summary. I'll just compare again to traditional software security and IT software, especially. We discover new vectors of attack all the time, and we just have to be ready to rewrite and defend all of our software to it. So hopefully we get a lot more interest in smart contracts and to auditing and testing them, so that and offering bug bounties. That'd be amazing.
Speaking of hacks, by the way, the flash loan attack is, by the way, not a hack, but an exploit of the way that smart contracts work. So, so there's also still works that needs to be done in terms of the codes and how the way that the smart contracts are constructed. From what I can see, and again, like I'm sounding like a shill, the problem with flash loans is that it uses a centralized oracle and not a decentralized oracle. And as we all know, who provides a decentralized oracle? You know, the thing I always talk about. I'm sorry, I just can't help it.
So this flash loan, just for clarification, this flash loan was not in any way connected to. Can somebody drive me through what happened in this, not the DAO, but the flash loan exploit?
Well, basically, from what I understand, is you take a loan immediately and swap back, and then you try and through that you try to lower the value of an asset. You try to manipulate the value of another asset, right? And from that way you can extract more of it. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's the gist of it. And if you use and what they did, they basically swap assets and then swap to another asset from another exchange, and then they triggered it by where it happened. It happened on Curve, the last one, and because the oracle is centralized, there's one single point of failure, and that way it becomes easier to manipulate the price that they want to manipulate through the fast, immediate transactions that they.
Do you mean they just trade faster than the price keeps up, and so they just stay ahead of essentially the curve, and then they can just trade against themselves?
Yeah, I think that might be a good way to summarize it. I'll have to read up more about it. So, I think that's a good way to look to summarize it.
Yeah.
So they're basically exploiting the centralized oracle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. That's actually that's a big vulnerability.
These are I look at them as applications. I guess like these contracts come together as applications in and of themselves, and they all are on their own. I guess they're all on Ethereum. They're using Ethereum, but they're it's a combination of these contracts, and I guess one thing goes wrong with one of them, it can be devastating. So it's best to look at it as it's best to look at them as applications of code. And this is only on Ethereum, like I said, but it can also be, I believe they're trying to have I guess some organizations are trying to have separate chains entirely, completely disjoint from Ethereum. So, there are those considerations as well, not just contracts on a singular blockchain, but the implementation of another blockchain and these two things interfacing with one another. I believe that's called layer 2. Is that right? Or is that something else?
That's a good question.
So, yeah. Okay. It would be layer 7 is the traditional way of describing that. And this relates to the OSI model of computer networking. And so
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm familiar with
Oh, no,
that
no
in
problem.
particular. There's a term that is used in regards to cryptocurrency with layer
Oh,
two
okay,
being like
okay.
a side chain is like I guess that's the colloquial term.
Okay,
Um,
I was mistaken.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd like to answer. I don't have a complete answer though. Except that I think uh, in regards to Ether or Ethereum 2.0, I think layer one is essentially like the current chain. It's the current Ethereum chain, and then layer two is basically what Ethereum 2.0 will be, and then that's where transactions will take place. And then on layer one, the current chain, that's where they'll be settled and then saved, unless I'm mistaken on that. So there'd be two chains interacting with each other.
Yeah, I very much I'm positive that Ethereum 2 and layer 2 are two different things. Like layer
Okay.
2
Yeah.
means that I now that I remember it, it means that you're using a private blockchain, whereas layer 1 is the public blockchain. Say
I see.
you are doing something, you're using the contract inside of the on the Ethereum chain. This is layer one. This is a very public. Say you are an institution of some sort and would like to interface with that in some way, you would make your own, say a permission chain or something of that sort. You want to keep track of your information that way. This would be layer two.
Hmm.
Um,
Cool. All right. Shall we move on to the next?
Yeah,
next
go
thing?
ahead. Grab the mic saber, if you'd like.
Cool. All right. So okay. So I wanna do a slight deep dive into DeFi itself because I feel like this is something that kind of
mhm.
underpins a lot of our conversations, and the conversations to come. And I feel like it's kind of important to kind of like drill to try to make it as simple as possible because let's say we're talking about um DAOs and DeFi dApps and all these kinds of things, compound, blah blah blah. It all seems to fit into the same DeFi um, ecosystem, I think. So yeah, I feel like it's important to get that out of the way so that people can follow along. So yeah, so in terms of what DeFi actually is, I feel like it's worth recapping what dApps are. So dApps is basically short for decentralized applications, and decentralized applications are, from my understanding, apps that basically run on a distributed computing system on a blockchain of some sort, as opposed to the centralized servers that most applications run on today. So, for instance, you have an app that runs on AWS or like Google or like Azure or something like that, or what Firebase and whatnot. These are centralized, so there's like one place where the data is basically stored. So yeah, decentralized applications. You have applications that are distributed across multiple computers, and they're stored in a decentralized fashion. So DeFi um, is essentially an ecosystem, or decentralized finance is a kind of ecosystem that more or less interacts with these dApps in various ways. So, from my understanding, there does seem to be a spectrum. So, even though decentralized is in the name, not all decentralized financial applications are fully decentralized. I think that's important to keep in mind. There's kind of like, as I said, a spectrum. Some are more, some are less. And I think it's worth comparing to traditional finance, which is what Turing seems to cover quite a lot, and some of the issues that arise from those. Which one of which is just the all the bureaucratic mess that tends to take place, and just the fact that like the main source of truth is a very small number of uh, people in a relatively or pretty undemocratic fashion, right? So then they're making all of the decisions and then employing it through their um, proprietary softwares and whatnot. It's not open, it's not decentralized or anything like that. And obviously, in CFI, you trust the company or the government, and this is something that we're supposed to try to overcome in the DeFi space. So in DeFi, we're basically trying to provide these financial applications whether it's so think of it like a stack, right? You have this congealment of different Lego blocks, so to speak. I think a common phrase that's thrown around in the DeFi space is that decentralized finance is kind of like financial Lego, so to speak. So in CeFi, you have just one, or CeFi centralized finance, sorry. So like traditional centralized finance, you have one company, proprietary. They're trying to just do whatever they're doing. Decentralized finance basically takes that and breaks it apart into a variety of different elements that come together to form a stack of DeFi applications. So one of which could be, say, decentralized stablecoins, which helps to remove like volatility, right? I'm sure anyone that's interested even remotely in cryptocurrencies have seen the market cap like fluctuate incredibly. But then there's a few like DAI, which is a stable coin, which is basically stable. So that's a decentralized stablecoin. You have decentralized money markets, which enables like lending and borrowing. You can even have decentralized insurance to counteract certain applications that may lose your funds. Right, you can have insurance, but it's done in a different way than the traditional finance or insurance. So yeah, all of these different applications come together to form the DeFi ecosystem. And one of the big benefits, I would say, to DeFi or decentralized finance is that, as I was mentioning earlier, is that it basically distributes the power of finance. Basically, it allows anyone with an internet connection to have the same financial um, access to financial applications as anyone in the world, assuming we all start to use them. And even if we don't, right, these applications are available, they're working, they're functioning. But there are risks, right? And these risks have to be taken into consideration. It may be the case that the protocol goes bust or something like that. Maybe the case where someone who's written the software has written in certain bugs, which leads to some of the hacks that we've spoken about before. There's, as Ridvan will probably be interested in, there's a lot of Oracle attacks too, which is why something like Chainlink is trying to solve that problem. And yeah, so those are the sort of that's the sort of 101, so to speak. And so we have this new ecosystem that's trying to solve a lot of the problems that exist in the centralized financial world. And the idea is to make all of these different blocks, or Lego blocks, so to speak, as I mentioned earlier, to make them as interoperable as possible, to make it easier to communicate with other pieces of software in that particular stack. So, for example, a popular DeFi protocol is MakerDAO, and it basically consists of, well, yeah, so you have something like MakerDAO, which is kind of like a base layer DeFi application, and then you may have something like Compound, which is another popular DeFi application, which essentially puts together the Lego blocks of, say, like MakerDAO and like DAI and a custom Compound smart contract, and puts them all together. And what is so like interesting to this, or what I find so interesting about this, is that like it allows for the emergence of applications that we can't even perceive right now. So in the early days of blockchain technology, in terms of the first generation, we just had basic financial transactions, and then in the second generation, you had Ethereum with the smart contracts, and the main use cases were just tokens, right? You just made a token, said, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing, raise a bunch of money, and then do God knows what." And then once DeFi started to take root, you now have the emergence of all these new applications that are taking hold of the applications that were built before them. So you may have Ethereum, for example, and then built on Ethereum, you may have, as I was talking about, like MakerDAO, which is supposed to be this decentralized platform for decentralized autonomous organizations. And then built on top of that, you may have a company, you may have a protocol like Compound, which takes advantage of all the layers below it to create something new. So you can have this emergent field of applications that are trying to solve a variety of problems. And I'll try and link this diagram that I saw the other day, which basically shows that, like, it's the possibilities are more or less like limitless, because for every like connection between one app and the applications before them, you can have another application which solves a problem that those two applications didn't solve themselves. And because we're talking about smart contracts, transparent software that's out there on the blockchain, people can just put them together and inject their own smart contracts, and to build upon that, and to create this very vast ecosystem of decentralized applications, in particular, in regards to finance, allowing people to have access to the kinds of technologies that they don't have access to right now. And this is especially important for the billion plus people in the developing world who still don't have access to even the basic financial applications. And it's also important for people in the developed world who are trying to escape the bureaucratic mess that is finance and like all these kinds of things. So yeah, I feel like it was important to set that foundation, so that we can have so that people that aren't too familiar with the technology can sort of have a foundational layer. And I'm sure everyone else can chime in and give their own takes as well. But yeah, I feel like that's important to lay that kind of groundwork for people who aren't too familiar with the technology. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's an application. It's one of the applications. Defi is one of the many applications that and it's probably going to be the most talked about for I guess I don't know, maybe till I think it's till maybe March. I'm not. I mean, it's going to be talked about considerably after that, but uh, I think we're really ramping up here, and it's gonna. I'm expecting 2021 to be Defi crazy, and I'm gonna get very kind of like, oh god, let's worry about let's try to do some something bigger.
I heard DeFi was dead. What are you talking about? I heard it was over. Done. It's just bad.
It's bad.
I think DeFi, the craze will return once Bitcoin is stabilized again. Right now, Bitcoin is on a tear. Typically, when that happens, all the other projects or whatever, they're not stopping or whatever, but the focus just becomes on Bitcoin.
All the attention goes to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And like it's one of those things where even back as early as like 2017, you'd see it on Twitter and whatnot. Whenever Bitcoin was rallying, like it's almost as though like when Bitcoin rallies, a lot of the other altcoins rally, because they're kind of like beholden to the dominance of Bitcoin. But then once Bitcoin kind of retraces, all the other coins kind of retrace as well. So it still seems like even in 2020, Bitcoin still has that dominance. But I think as other projects start to develop more and more like practical use cases, they can kind of like decouple themselves and to take on a life of their own to really add value to people. But yeah, it's always fun to see people getting excited over Bitcoin going to the moon. But I think I don't know whether I can say that it will breach 20,000 this time. We'll have to see. I don't want to get I don't people that are concerned about the price. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
I,
it's
I
important to hold your excitement, because this has happened before, and then it retraced all the way back down to like 3,000. So I don't think it'll go down that low. But you know, it's always the people who come to the industry with like fresh eyes. They see, oh, Bitcoin is going to the moon, so then they invest in like 19,000. and then a week later it's at 15,000. Then they get terrified, they start selling because all the whales have already taken their profits, and then it just continues to go back down and down, and people
Well, in my opinion, we are in a bull market because Bitcoin's 20-week
Mhm.
moving average is about $11,000, and we're well above that. So,
Yeah.
and considering that we also been closing lately, in like last time we closed above 15,000, 16,000 was in 2018 January.
Yeah.
So,
January 2018. That's when it really went up there, and then from that it was just pretty much a bear market. You had a few spikes from then until now, but now is the first big like pump after that because I was
But
right
that bear
there.
market,
Yeah.
that bear market that you talked about has also killed a lot of the shit coins. You know,
Mhm.
all the scams and the dumb ICO with that advertised that we're going to be the next Ether killer. Now, by the way, now it's always the next Chainlink killer. By the way, is now the new thing
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
popping up.
And I think that's
So,
really good because one of the problems that I saw was that, and this kind of goes back to the issues that I had with the community as a whole. And obviously, as I was saying last week or 2 weeks ago, it was a fun time. It was exciting to see people getting so happy about this technology and like shilling and memeing and all this kind of stuff. And I made a lot of friends during that time. But in terms of the actual like technology, I feel like a lot of people didn't really do the necessary like analysis or fundamental analysis on the coins themselves to really see what was what. And you had a bunch of people trying to take advantage of the fact that so many people were excited over this, right? And so a lot of those coins have been shaken out of the industry, but my fear is that once the industry ramps up again, you'll have the same kinds of companies popping out of nowhere again. And because obviously we have fresh faces, so there'll still be people who don't know anything about the previous scams and lending platforms that were about during that time.
It seems like you want to.
okay.
It seems like you want to jump in, Luam. Right? Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I guess this is like small bet, I guess you could say, like this is don't do anything on my advice, but you know, if you ever remind me, just mark me down as saying I think the market cap is gonna reach $1 trillion sometime next year. We're gonna breach $1 trillion market cap, whole cryptocurrency market. I just you know, that's just my, I guess that's my conservative
We were
estimation, right?
close last time, right? We got to like
Yeah,
900 million.
it got
900
very
billion.
close.
Yeah.
It got very close,
Yeah.
but it's gonna break past. I think it's gonna break past $1 trillion market cap, all cryptocurrency, not particular, not Bitcoin in particular, but all cryptocurrency. I think that's a given. And I don't even want to focus on the you know, value, the spectacle that caused, like the craziness that causes, because it takes people away from like that's why we're here.
Technology.
Yeah, that's why we're actually here right now, is to help them know that there are other things that they can do, or that need to be, that should be considered for. Like, you know, I think voting is a big thing. Some type of accounting of resources is another thing. Those two things are like the two very big things. How do we get there? It's a lot. In particular, I believe, you know, I think it's a ground game of terms of like building like webs of trust, but we can describe that a little bit later, because I think it's kind of
Hopefully the leftist mooners take their profits and do all the stuff that we want them to do with it.
right. In the meantime, yeah, in the meantime, do what you gotta do. I'm not gonna stop you. I wanted to ask you all about a more political question about like the election, and how you all think that that's gonna maybe.
I will. I'll jump in here kind of quickly, and then Ridvan, it seemed like you wanted to say something. It seems to me, if I were just to give like my opinion, that instability, larger deficits, search for yield, potential concern over like froth in equities markets and so forth, is what would maybe help you get to your $1 trillion valuation of cryptocurrency overall. So I'm imagining that more and more nations next year are going to have to be running, larger fiscal deficits in order to try to spend out of recessions. I've really been following the debts in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, in Turkey, and so forth, and it seems that there is, more and more nations are in near default on their World Bank loans, on their IMF loans, and so forth. So, this is why I actually do think that you're going to see more people looking into alternative forms of either storeholder value currency or something.
Yeah, hyperinflation is going to really be a big thing that people are going to try to escape from, I think, especially in developing countries. Especially if the solution to their problems is just a few on the internet. Basically, they can somehow, if there are ways to get rid of their local currencies that are getting hyperinflated, then I think that's probably one of the biggest use cases, I think, for the developing world. It's just how can people in the developing world who are recognizing these problems really actually try to get around it, so to speak. So that's an interesting conversation to have, I think. And
yeah, that would be an entire show to actually talk about the political
sure.
impact. Yeah, maybe we can maybe save that one for next show, because like I really think that because I have a lot more opinion,
Yeah.
but again
Yeah.
it's just my opinion.
Mm.
Redvan, it
I'm
seems
Well, I
like
think
go ahead.
yeah, I think touring, first of all, that might be a better show to do with somebody that's like really much in depth with not like has more in depth knowledge of Bitcoin and its uses as a terms of a security assets and store of value. So more like maybe a one-on-one show would be better, because if we do a podcast, we're just going to keep it short and
Yeah.
say, okay, this is this, and then move on to something else. The other thing, the reason why I had my hand up is because of, I was just going to make a comment about now with the DeFi craze and the rise of Bitcoin in terms of people getting scammed. Please just, you have the internet in front of you. You have a search engine in front of you. Just type what it is, figure out what it's used for, read some analysis, and don't be dumb. Okay, don't cheat. If Here's a pro tip: if you go to a website of any new project and you see astronauts and rockets on it, click on the X button, because that's just a scam. Any serious project is not going to feature a rocket and say you're going to the moon. It's just dumb. Okay. Look also who's involved. Look how typically a serious project will be involved with other serious projects. And if you want to, and in terms of the bullishness, I kind of agree. I also think it's conservatively we will be reaching $1 trillion market cap. Maybe, and I actually think we'll go a bit
Yeah.
higher than that, because
I,
we're in a bull market, and all the shit coins has basically died away. And the new space that's coming, all those that have survived in the serious projects, is going to go up and up and up. And
Also, one other thing,
and
but let me just
last
quickly
part,
interject right here.
yeah.
So like
But that's
just to add on real quick. Also, just based on that particular point, on what you said on the website, is that like, yeah, even if the website looks good, it's not it has nothing to do with the actual technology of the project that they're talking about. It's just they just have to hire, let's say, one React developer. But yeah, that's it. Go ahead, carry on.
absolutely true.
And I'll say this in terms of people being afraid of the US dollar and moving towards Bitcoin, it's actually tangible. You can see it. More and more countries are now accepting Bitcoin as a swappable asset. In Turkey, last poll I saw, about 10% of all Turks have owned or owns some form of crypto, usually typically BTC, XRP, or Ethereum. I'm not a huge fan of XRP, but I can understand why people kind of own it, because I don't know why. I actually don't like it. But the point is, though, people are, especially countries that are used to inflations, are moving away from the dollar, because they're recognizing, what's going to happen now with all these trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars being pressed? Well, the value of the dollar is, of course, going to tank, So why not move your assets to a non-sinking iceberg or non-melting iceberg, and instead put into something more tangible?
But Dalio said that he said that they're going to ban it. So
Oh,
how are they going to ban it? Mr. Dalio said it.
I guess we have to listen to Dalio. He's the emperor. I know you're joking.
No, like I'm partially, but I actually do like want to kind of discuss, like, how would you go about banning it? How would a government try to ban it? Like, and why would that be a bad thing? Why would it be just against their interest, I guess?
Ban Bitcoin?
Ban cryptocurrency, like how, and then
how, what would
I guess what actions could they take?
Oh,
they set up borders is the only way. Is they literally have to find a way of cracking into your your private internet traffic and proving that you're doing it. And this is the problem with authoritarianism and the internet. It's not going to happen.
Yep, that's the one. That's the one.
Okay,
telecommunications companies.
Oh. Yeah, so they'd have to, because obviously, let's say I was in a situation where I bought like $1 million worth of Bitcoin, and I just memorized my private key, and then they banned it. Right? They'd have to like forcibly insert some kind of centralized brain computer interface and like force it out of me. It's just a set of characters. It's in my head. It's honestly, it's not insanely difficult to memorize a private key. Obviously, it's rather inconvenient now, but if you knew that the government was coming to knock on your door next week or next month, I'm pretty sure like most people just memorize their private keys. There's ways, there's mnemonics, there's all these kinds of things. You can create a story out of the words to memorize your private phrase, your 24 word phrase and whatnot. So yeah, like we're talking about mathematics, right? Unless they figured out how to This is interesting. Like if they get a monopoly somehow on like quantum computer, then they say, okay, now it's time to just destroy all of these people that are holding this amount of Bitcoin before they know about it. So like they have this technology, and before they allow it to get out there, they're just like, all right, cool, lock everything down. Let's destroy this entire protocol.
But by the way, everyone out there, you're on ED 25519, right? You're already post quantum crypto. You are ready for that quantum computer revolution. There's nothing going to stop us.
There was I don't want to take people's time. There was a video that I just watched. I like watching Uneducated Economist. I think he's got some good ideas and such. He just put a video out about censoring Bitcoin mining pool. A government's dreams come true. And he was somewhat talking about where, like, I guess you wouldn't accept like certain wallets because like you would try to like designate them as like a wallet that wouldn't be allowed into the ledger or so forth. I'll have to watch it again to see kind of how it went. But it was something that it made me think when you asked your question, Lewum. Okay, so we're 2 hours into the show. We can go for another hour because we didn't get to Lewum, you getting to do a deep dive. Brento, we didn't get to you being able to do a deep dive. Carl, we didn't get to you for one either. So this is...
I don't have any deep dives, but I'm happy to everything we talked about today was great. But I have nothing that I could necessarily dive deeply into for you guys.
Well then,
same. I'm very comfortable where we are right now.
Okay. I like it because it does seem like we left a lot on the table that I do kind of like want to get back to, because I want to talk about the political implications. I do want to talk about like trying to ban these currencies. I do want to talk about like these conservative valuations for going next year, why we think some people are moving into them. So is this an okay pause point for episode 2 for everyone?
I think it's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same.
I would like to add, I would just like to like round out that so yeah, the ways that they could ban cryptocurrencies, telecommunications companies, like similar to how they did with like BitTorrent. Like right now, like if you download something over BitTorrent that is like has a DMCA, they can watch the traffic, and they'll just say, oh no, you downloaded this thing, and we're going to stop you from doing that. So yeah, you could use something such as like Tor or some other network to communicate, but if we're talking about this thing being as ubiquitous as we want it to be, like, and for people to use it, we cannot expect people to just install, censorship resistant software on the computer by themselves, because Microsoft may not do it necessarily, or Apple may not necessarily do it. So there's that, and then they could also just prohibit the exchanges, banking services, and payment processors, I guess you could say, which that's. I'm just trying to play out possible scenarios, so people can understand the things that you would expect if anything of that sort were to come down. That would be some of the ways.
All right. Well, how about we do, everybody talk about like your shows, talk about your programs, your Twitters, and everything. We'll start with Saber this time, and then we'll go Saber to Ridvan to Lewum to Brento to Carl, and we will start to wrap it up.
Cool. Another great episode. I'm looking forward to 100 episode celebration. We've got 98 to go. But yeah, okay. In terms of my content, I make Afrofuturist content, video essays to be specific. Probably going to start branching out soon. Might start streaming soon. Who knows? Once I can figure out my equipment and whatnot. We'll see. All right, my latest video, if anyone wants to check out my video essays, is in regards to Walter Rodney and how Europe underdeveloped Africa, as well as a little conversation or a little brief paragraph on the Deep, which is an Afrofuturist novel about African mermaids, which is very interesting, and how I tied the two together. So it's good. It's a decent video, if I do say so myself. If anyone wants to check it out, go ahead. And yeah, that's all. I'll leave links in the chat if anyone wants to follow me. So yeah, I appreciate it.
And I'll put everyone's links down below the YouTube video as well. Thank you, Ridvan. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna be honest, guys. My streams are boring. Because I just read stuff, and I try to, and mostly revolves around Chainlink. And if I don't read, I watch Chainlink videos with Circuit and Ari Jules talking about what they're doing. So, and I find it fascinating. I find it interesting, and I sometimes get angry that people don't watch my streams because this is the future. But I'm also going to be honest with myself. What I am doing is pretty boring. I'm more active on Twitter, much more active on Twitter. So if you want to throw me a follow, it's Nasruddin Link. There we go. Just type that on Twitter, and you'll find me, and just follow that. And otherwise, there's not much to say. My streams are boring. Don't subscribe. Don't watch. Don't follow.
We'll do better next time. We'll have a talk about how to explain why it's exciting. But I do appreciate you coming to give your time. Yeah, Luam, thank you.
Oh yes, my name is Luam. You can reach me on Twitter or GitHub. I'm in the current process of like building that up. I'm going to start posting a lot of information there. So it's a collaborative platform. I want to collaborate there. Some things that I can actually like that you all can look at, and if you have issues with it, please, like, I would love to hear them there. Check me out.
Yeah, what is how can they find your Twitter or your GitHub?
GitHub, LVWEVM. I'll type it in the chat.
Okay.
And or let me just say it here. Read it in the link below.
There you go.
Do that.
Yeah, and Brento.
Yeah, if you guys, if I'm streaming, I stream at Twitch TV/BrentoBox, and I usually am watching YouTube, playing some games, and down to talk about whatever anybody is interested in talking. I don't really do, specifically or really at all any kind of blockchain content, but if anybody wants to ever come on and talk about it, I'm up for it.
Wonderful. And your environment, Seattle. You're muted, but I do see a nice gimbal.
Thanks for the reminder. Yeah, I am doing IRL streams now, and you'll see me at Your Environment Seattle on Twitch. If you check out my YouTube channel, there's a whole lot of curated content there now. I have cut out all of the old boring live streams, and I've made private all of the really irrelevant content. So yestv.org. You'll see the featured videos are really good education on energy, especially nuclear energy.
Wonderful. And I am Touring News, or Brad. I just really, once again, want to thank everybody for getting together. I do hope that we somehow hit 100 episodes. That would be, that would really be incredible if we do make it to Tales from the Crypto 100. I just, once again, really thank you, everybody, for all of your time. Thank you for coming around. If you want to see my live streams at all, I stream at twitch.tv/Touring News. Do a decent amount of coverage on international news, macroecon, monetary systems. I got more into crypto due to some of the friends that are on screen here with me today. I've done like a decent amount of like live streaming footage, some Philadelphia protests, some DC protests, and so forth. So this is going to bring us to the end of Tales from the Crypto episode 2. Like, comment, subscribe, share, watch on your streams, tweet it out to all of your friends. Thank you very much, and we will see you shortly.